Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now let's get into today's tale. I'm staring at my bank account 0017, not even enough to buy a coffee, and my phone is blowing up with texts from my daughter Mia. "Mom, I swear we'll pay you back. Blake just needs a little more time." A little more time. That's what she's been saying for months now. My entire life savings gone. $43,000 that took me 27 years to save. Gone in 4 months to a man I've met. Exactly twice. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely hold my phone. I type back, "There is no more money, Mia." Then I turn my phone off completely. I don't want to hear the excuses anymore. I'm Ellen, by the way. I'm 58, single mom, administrative assistant at the same dental office for the last 19 years. Never made more than $42,000 a year, but I was proud of what I'd managed to save. It wasn't retirement money exactly. More like maybe someday I won't have to work myself to death money. I'm the kind of woman who cuts her own hair to save $60, who drives a 2007 Honda Civic with 212,000 miles on it, who buys store brand everything. The kind who worked through pneumonia 3 years ago because I couldn't afford to miss the paycheck. And I just gave everything I had to my daughter's boyfriend, a man who promised to marry her, a man who it turns out already has a wife. Before I go deep like this, video subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read all of them. I really do. Sometimes at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep, which is most nights now, your comments help me feel less, I don't know, stupid, alone, like the biggest fool who ever lived. Anyway, let me take you back to January when this whole nightmare started. It was Mia's 25th birthday. I'd saved up to take her to this nice Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, but nicer than where we usually go. I was excited to have some mother-daughter time. It had been a while. She showed up 40 minutes late, which that's just Mia. But she wasn't alone. She brought this guy, Blake. Even saying his name now makes my stomach turn. He was older, maybe mid-30s. Handsome in that way that good-looking men get when they've been told they're good-looking their whole lives. Nice watch, nice shoes, one of those perfect smiles that probably cost someone a fortune in orthodontia. He stood up when I approached the table. I'll give him that, and pulled out my chair. "Mom, this is Blake," Mia said, and I swear to God, her entire face was glowing. I hadn't seen her look that happy since... I don't know if I've ever seen her look that happy. We've been dating for a few weeks. A few weeks. That was the first lie, though. I didn't know it then. It had been 4 days. 4 days. And she was already bringing him to her birthday dinner with me. But I smiled and shook his hand and said all the mom things you're supposed to say. "Where did you two meet? What do you do for work?" All that. He said they met at a coffee shop. Said he was in finance, which should have been my first red flag because what does that even mean? Everyone's in finance. It's like saying you're in business. It tells you nothing. But Mia seemed so happy. And I just wanted her to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. Throughout dinner, Blake kept telling these stories about investments he'd made, deals he'd closed, how he'd helped this friend triple their money, how he'd spotted that market trend nobody else saw coming. Meanwhile, he's ordering the most expensive wine on the menu. Appetizers I can't pronounce. I'm sitting there doing math in my head, wondering if my credit card is going to get declined. And Mia is just enraptured, hanging on every word, laughing at all his jokes. At one point, she reaches over and touches his arm, and he gives her this look that's so, I don't know, possessive, like she's already his. It made me uneasy, but I told myself I was being overprotective. That's what mothers do, right? Worry too much. When the check came, $287 more than I spend on groceries in 2 weeks, Blake reached for it. I started to object, to at least offer to split it. But before I could say anything, his card was declined. There was this awful moment of silence. He laughed it off, said something about his bank's fraud protection being too aggressive, pulled out another card. That one declined too. I ended up paying, maxed out my credit card. But Mia looked so mortified that I just wanted to make the moment go away. Blake promised to pay me back. With interest, he joked. I never saw that money again. Should have been. My sign. 2 weeks later, Mia called me, more excited than I'd heard her in years. Mom, Blake's taking me to Paris for Valentine's Day. Can you believe it? No, I couldn't believe it. Who takes someone to Paris after a month of dating? But she was. So happy, talking about the Eiffel Tower, about some fancy hotel he'd booked, and then she hesitated. I could hear it in her voice. That little catch that happens when she wants something but doesn't know how to ask. The thing is, she finally said his accounts are frozen right now. Some mix-up with his investment firm. He'll get it all back. Plus a settlement, but it could take a few weeks to resolve. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. Could I maybe borrow just a little for the trip, like $3,000? He'll pay you back double, Mom. He promised. I should have said no. Everything in me was screaming to say no. But do you know how hard it is to deny your child the thing they want most in the world, especially when that child hasn't seemed truly happy in years? Mia's had a rough time. Her dad left when she was 12 and she took it hard. Started acting out in high school, hanging with the wrong crowd. There were some dark years, drinking, a few minor run-ins with the police. A boyfriend who left her with nothing but debt and trust issues. She's been better the last few years, working as a receptionist, taking some community college classes. But I've never seen her as happy as she was talking about this trip with Blake. So I said yes. I transferred $3,000 from my savings to her account. $3,000 that took me 8 months to save. They went to Paris. She sent me pictures. The Eiffel Tower, sidewalk cafes, Blake kissing her cheek in front of the Seine. She looked so happy. When they got back, she came over to my apartment for dinner. Couldn't stop talking about the trip, how Blake had connections everywhere, got them into exclusive restaurants, knew exactly where to go, how he was teaching her about investing, about building wealth, how different he was from her other boyfriends. He has plans, Mom, she said, eyes bright. Real plans for us. A week later, she called again. Blake had an investment opportunity, something exclusive just for friends and family, guaranteed returns of 30% in 3 months. He was putting in $50,000 of his own money, but he had a chance to increase their position, if they could find another $10,000. It's a sure thing, Mom, she said. We could turn your $10,000 into $13,000 by summer. Think about it. That's like getting paid $3,000 to do nothing. I had $17,000 in my savings at that point. Everything I had. I told her I'd think about it. I even called my bank, asked to speak to someone about investments. The banker told me that no legitimate investment could guarantee a 30% return in 3 months, that anything promising those kinds of returns was likely a scam. I tried to tell Mia. She got angry. Said I didn't understand finance. Said Blake had done this dozens of times. Said I was just resistant to change, to taking risks. That this was why I was still living paycheck to paycheck in my 50s. That hurt. It hurt because there was a grain of truth in it. I have always played it safe, always gone the secure route. And where had it gotten me? A 1-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a retirement fund that wouldn't last 3 years. So I gave her the $10,000. Not for Blake, I told myself. For Mia, as an investment in her happiness. You already know where this is going, don't you? 3 months came and went. No returns. Blake had explanations. The market had shifted. They were actually reinvesting for an even bigger payoff, just a few more months. Mia believed every word, or at least she said she did. Then came the medical emergency. Blake's mother needed surgery. Insurance wouldn't cover it all. They needed $20,000 and fast. Blake's accounts were still tied up. In these investments, could I help just until everything matured? By this point, I'd given them $13,000. I had $4,000 left. I said no. I had to say no. Mia didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Then she showed up at my door at 11 p.m. on a work night, crying. Blake's mother was getting worse. The surgery was scheduled for next week, but they needed the deposit now. Blake was working every angle he could, but they were still short. He's going to propose, Mom, she whispered, clutching my hands. He showed me the ring after his mom recovers. But how can we celebrate if she doesn't? She couldn't even finish the sentence, just dissolved into tears. I gave her the $4,000, all I had left. The next time I asked about Blake's mother, Mia was vague. She was recovering. It was a difficult time. Blake didn't like to talk about it. Then last month, Mia called me on a Sunday night. Her voice was different, excited in a way that made my skin prickle. "Blake found a house, Mom," she said. "It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, big yard, in that neighborhood I love. But we need to move fast. There are other offers." My chest felt tight. That's great, honey." "So Blake's investments paid off?" "Almost," she said quickly. "We're so close, like days away from a huge return, but the thing is we need a down payment now or we'll lose the house. $20,000. Just for a few weeks, Mom. A month tops. A month tops." I said slowly. "I don't have $20,000. I've given you everything I had." There was a pause. "What about your retirement account? The one from your old job?" I felt cold all over. I hadn't touched that account in years. It had just over $26,000 in it, my absolute last resort money. "No," I said, "absolutely not. I'd have to pay penalties, taxes. Mia, I'm 58 years old. I need something for retirement." "Mom," she said, and her voice got very quiet. "Blake thinks I'm already bringing the money. He's at the realtor's office right now, signing papers. If I don't show up with it..." "Mom, I think he'll leave me. He's already done so much for me. Been so patient. I wish I could tell you I stayed strong, that I told her no, that I finally saw through the manipulation. But when your child is crying, begging you for help, swearing this is the last time. God, I'm so stupid." I cleaned out my retirement account the next day. $26,000 minus the early withdrawal penalty. I handed Mia a check for $20,000. The house, she said, cost $680,000. My $20,000 was just the down payment to secure it until Blake's big investment matured. That was 4 weeks ago. 3 days ago, I got an overdraft notice from my bank. A Netflix subscription. I'd forgotten about tried to charge my account. I couldn't cover $13.99. I called Mia, asked when Blake's investment was maturing, asked when I might see some of my money back. She wouldn't give me a straight answer. Said Blake was under a lot of stress. Said I needed to be patient. I hung up and just sat there on my bed, staring at the wall. $43,000. Everything I had gone. Something snapped in me. I got in my car and drove to the address where Mia said they were buying the house. There was no for sale sign, no sign anyone was moving in or out. I knocked on the door and an older woman answered. She'd lived there for 12 years. The house wasn't for sale. Had never been for sale. I drove to Mia's apartment. She wasn't home. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 3 hours waiting. When she finally pulled up, Blake was driving a silver Audi I'd never seen before. They were laughing as they got out of the car. Mia was wearing new clothes, carrying shopping bags from stores I could never afford. Blake had his arm around her waist, pulling her close, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh again. They looked rich, happy, carefree, like a couple with no worries in the world. While I sat there in my 19-year-old Honda with the check engine light on, trying to figure out how I'd pay my rent next month, I confronted them in the parking lot, asked about the house that didn't exist, about Blake's mother's surgery, about the investment returns I'd never seen. Mia looked shocked, then embarrassed. Blake stepped in front of her, all smooth confidence. "Ellen," he said, and the way he said my name like we were old friends made my skin crawl. "I understand your concern. The housing deal is complicated. We had to pivot to a different property and the investments are solid. I promise you these things take time, but we're good for the money, every penny." "When?" I demanded. "When will I see my money? I can't pay my rent. Blake, I have nothing left." He looked uncomfortable, glanced at Mia. "We're in a bit of a cash flow situation right now, but soon, very soon." Mia wouldn't even look at me, just stared at the ground, clutching her shopping bags. I left. What else could I do? Scream in a parking lot? Call the police and say what? That I voluntarily gave my adult daughter $43,000 and now regretted it? Yesterday morning, I woke up early, couldn't sleep, decided to go to this coffee shop near my apartment, not to buy anything, just to sit somewhere that wasn't my depressing apartment. I brought a cup of tap water in an old travel mug, pretended it was coffee. Pathetic, I know. I was sitting there staring out the window, wondering if I could sell my car for enough to cover next month's rent, when a woman sat down across from me, just sat right down at my table like she knew me. "You must be Ellen," she said. She was about my age, well-dressed, wearing a wedding ring that caught the light. "I'm Diane. I believe you're the woman funding my husband's affair with a girl, young enough to be his daughter." I swear to God, for a second, I thought I was hallucinating, just sitting there, mouth hanging open like an idiot, staring at this woman, Diane, who'd just dropped this bomb on me with the calmness of someone commenting on the weather. I couldn't even form a sentence. My brain was short-circuiting. "How do you know who I am?" She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it around to show me. It was a photo of me from that day in the parking lot arguing with Blake and Mia. I looked awful, red-faced, hair a mess, mouth open, mid-shout like a crazy person. "I've had a private investigator following Blake for 3 months, Diane said, putting her phone away. "You're not the first, you know. Your daughter isn't even the first. He's been running this same scam for years." My stomach lurched. I felt like I might throw up right there in the coffee shop. "Scam," I repeated. Not a question. Deep down, I'd known. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. Diane nodded, her face softening a little. "I'm sorry. That was abrupt of me. I've been tracking his movements, his accounts. I know he's taken you for quite a bit of money." $43,000, I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything I had." Didn't look surprised, just nodded again. Blake has a type. Single mothers with some savings, daughters with daddy issues. He finds the daughters first, usually. Charms them, makes them believe he's their ticket to a better life, then uses them to get to the mother's money. I felt my face burning with shame. How could I have been so stupid, so blind? If he's your husband, why are you telling me this? Why not just divorce him? Diane smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, I'm going to divorce him. But first, I'm going to make sure he can't do this to anyone else, and I need your help." We talked for 2 hours in that coffee shop. Diane bought me an actual coffee, then a sandwich when she realized I probably hadn't eaten. Her kindness made me want to cry, which is ridiculous considering she was married to the man who just destroyed my financial future. She told me everything. Blake Harmon, whose real name is Benjamin Harrison, has been married to Diane for 9 years. He's a former investment banker who lost his license 5 years ago for securities fraud, spent 8 months in a minimum security prison, got out and immediately went back to scamming people, just without the official job title. Diane found out about his affairs 2 years ago. The first time she forgave him. The second time she hired a divorce attorney. But then she discovered it wasn't just affairs. It was systematic fraud. He was seducing women, manipulating them and their families out of money, using some of it to maintain the lifestyle he and Diane had, the house in the suburbs, the nice cars, the country club membership, and funneling the rest into offshore accounts she couldn't access. "I could have just divorced him," Diane said, stirring her coffee. "Taken half of whatever assets I could find. But then I started getting calls. Women like you, mothers, grandmothers, people who'd lost everything. And I realized that if I just walked away, he'd keep doing this. Find another wife, create another respectable front, and keep destroying lives." So she'd been building a case, gathering evidence, recording conversations, tracking money, working with her lawyer to build something that would stick. Not just divorce him, but send him back to prison for a long time. "The problem is," she said, "I don't have a victim willing to press charges. The women he scams are too embarrassed, too ashamed to go public. And without that testimony, it's just my word against his." I knew what she was asking. The thought of having to admit publicly how stupid I'd been made me want to disappear. But the thought of Blake, Benjamin, doing this to someone else? What would I have to do? I asked. Diane laid it out for me. We needed evidence of the fraud. Not just my word, but proof. Text messages, emails, bank transfers with clear promises of returns. Recorded conversations where he acknowledged the debt and the false pretenses, enough to build a case for wire fraud, which is a federal offense. But he's careful, she said. He never puts the details in writing. It's always vague promises, always through the daughter or girlfriend. That's why we need to set him up. The plan was simple but terrifying. I would confront Blake again, but this time wearing a wire, get him to admit what he'd done, what he'd promised. Diane would be nearby, recording everything as backup. We take it to the FBI, who Diane's lawyer had already been in contact with. What? About Mia? I asked. She's my daughter. I can't just... Diane's face softened. From what my investigator has, she thought about it for a long moment. He took my dignity, she finally said. My trust, my security, things I can't put a price on. Getting those back? Yes, it was worth it. I understand what she means now. The money is gone. But I got something back that's worth more. My self-respect. The knowledge that I stood up finally and said no more. That I helped make sure Blake can't do this to anyone else. It's not a happy ending. There's no magic resolution where everything works out perfectly. No moment where all the money reappears, where all the pain is erased. Real life doesn't work that way. But sometimes real life gives you a different kind of victory. The kind that comes from facing the truth no matter how painful. From finding your voice when it matters most. I'm Ellen. I'm 58. I'm broke. Starting over, working 2 jobs, and I'm not a victim anymore. That's something Blake can never take away from me.